Naela Trenks was supposed to be dead. Ari Tomal was never meant to be found. And Halric Moen? He vanished without a trace. But Halric Moen, the quiet, unassuming trapper living deep in the Halston Ridge wilderness, thought he had buried every secret, silenced every scream, and perfected the art of vanishing people. What he didn't know was that one of his victims had clawed her way out of the grave, and she was about to drag all his horrors into the light. The town of Halston Ridge sat quietly in a valley surrounded by dense woods and long-forgotten trails. With its cozy diners, white picket fences, and tight-knit community, it looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. The people were friendly, routines were familiar, and crime was almost unheard of. It was the kind of town where you could walk your dog at night without fear, and most homes didn't even bother locking their doors. That sense of safety was deeply woven into Halston Ridge's identity, until the night Naela Trenks vanished. Naela was a 26-year-old veterinary assistant, known by nearly everyone in town. She had lived there all her life, working weekdays at Halric, the animal clinic, and helping her elderly father on weekends. On a cold Tuesday evening in January, she finished her shift and was expected home by 7. When she didn't show up, her father grew worried. By midnight, he had called the local sheriff. A search began almost immediately. Her car was found 2 days later on the edge of Elk Valley. Doors locked, keys gone, and no footprints in the kaya, snow around it. Inside the car, her purse and phone were missing. There was no blood, no struggle, just an eerie emptiness. The sheriff's department tried to keep things calm, assuming she may have had an accident or gotten lost in the woods, but people weren't so sure. Naela wasn't reckless. She didn't go hiking alone, and she had no history of depression or mental illness. Something about it felt wrong from the beginning. The town hadn't even begun to recover from Naela's disappearance, when 5 days later, another person went missing. Ari Tomal, a 21-year-old college student who was home for winter break. She had gone out for a morning run and never returned. Her family found her earbuds lying on the trail behind their house, with no other trace. Search teams, dogs, and volunteers combed the area for days, but there was nothing. No drag marks, no clothing, no sign of a struggle. Ari had vanished into thin air. Now the town was truly on edge. News vans arrived, reporters swarmed, and suddenly, Halston Ridge was at the center of national attention. Residents began checking locks twice and walking in pairs. Whispers of a serial kidnapper started to circulate, even though police urged the public not to jump to conclusions. Then came the third disappearance. Halric Moen, a 37-year-old mechanic known for his quiet nature and dedication to work, didn't show up to open his garage one Monday morning. His apartment was undisturbed. His truck was still in the driveway. The only odd thing was his cell phone, left charging on the kitchen counter with a half-finished cup of coffee beside it. It was like he had vanished in the middle of a thought. This third case broke something in the town. Fear settled in like a storm cloud. Parents kept their children inside. Businesses closed early. Church services and community meetings were filled with worried whispers. People looked at each other differently, suspiciously. No one knew who to trust. What puzzled investigators was that none of the 3 victims had any direct connection. They weren't friends, didn't work together, and had no overlapping social circles. Yet the timing and the way they disappeared seemed almost identical. No signs of violence, no ransom notes, no communication from the missing. Despite expanded searches, thermal imaging drones, and state police assistance, no significant leads emerged. The forest surrounding Halston Ridge was vast and unforgiving, perfect for hiding secrets. And it slowly became clear that someone out there, someone familiar with the area, had been watching. With time, hope began to fade. Memorials were held. The missing were declared presumed dead, and Halston Ridge returned to a version of its former self, but with an unspoken tension lingering in the air. It felt like the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something else to happen. And it would. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the sense of urgency around the disappearances in Halston Ridge began to fade. The news coverage dwindled, replaced by more current national tragedies. The police, having followed every lead to a dead end, unofficially moved on. There were no new clues, no suspects, and no bodies. The town mourned quietly, holding on to fading hope that perhaps the victims had simply run away, started over somewhere new, far from the eyes of Halston Ridge. But deep down, most knew that wasn't true. Behind the silence, one man was completely at peace. Halric Moen, a reclusive wildlife trapper, watched the town return to its daily rhythms from the depths of the forest. He lived miles beyond the last paved road, in a small, rotting cabin surrounded by thickets and tall pine. His home didn't appear on any maps, and he liked it that way. Halric had spent most of his life alone, quietly surviving in the wilderness, trapping animals for fur and food, occasionally coming into town for supplies. Most people didn't even know he existed. Halric had long felt like an outsider, observing people instead of interacting with them. Over the years, he developed an obsession, not with violence but with control. He saw how vulnerable people were, how predictable their lives had become. He started keeping journals, noting their routines, their paths to work, their shopping habits. His obsession became a dark routine. He studied people from the trees like he did wild prey. He waited. He watched. When the opportunity came to take Naela Trenks, Halric didn't hesitate. He had observed her for months, tracking her every step. He knew where she parked, when she left, and how long it would take before someone noticed she was gone. He had perfected the timing. With her disappearance, the power surged through him. But it wasn't just about taking someone. It was about keeping them, silencing them, removing them from the world so completely that no trace remained. His cabin had a hidden trapdoor beneath a rug in the kitchen. It led to a cold, hand-dug basement, reinforced with salvaged wood and thick plastic sheets. He had prepared it years in advance, just in case the need arose. There were chains bolted into the walls, a cot, and nothing else. No light, no sound from outside. It was complete isolation. When Naela didn't last as long as he expected, Halric was disappointed. She had tried to fight, refused to eat, and grew weak quickly. He believed she had died after 2 weeks, her body limp and still. Not wanting to leave evidence near his cabin, he wrapped her in plastic and drove deep into a forgotten logging path. There, he buried her in a shallow grave beneath wet soil, believing that would be the end of it. The feeling of control was intoxicating. After Naela, Halric moved on to his next victim with more confidence. Tomel had intrigued him. So young, so full of energy. She was more of a challenge, but ultimately just as easy to take. Like Naela, she disappeared without a sound. Halric thought of himself as invisible, operating under the radar, smarter than the town's investigators. He was sure no one would ever link the crimes to him. By the time he abducted Halric Moen, it felt like a routine. Halric's size had been a challenge, but Halric had learned from his mistakes. He planned every step, ensuring the abduction was quick and silent. Each disappearance fueled his delusion that he was untouchable. Halric believed he had mastered the art of erasure. The bodies were hidden, the basement was scrubbed. No DNA, no fingerprints. He never kept souvenirs. In his mind, he was smarter than the system, smarter than the world. What Halric didn't know, as he sat in his cabin flipping through the pages of his worn leather journal, was that one of his victims hadn't died the way he thought. Somewhere out in the forest, buried, beneath wet soil and pine needles, something had gone wrong. One mistake, one survivor. And that mistake was about to unravel everything. Buried beneath a blanket of wet leaves and soft earth, Naela Trenks gasped back into life. Her lungs, crushed under the weight of soil and panic, found air. Her fingers, frozen and raw, clawed upward with primal instinct. Halric Moen had believed, her dead, her limp body unresponsive when he tossed her into the shallow grave. But Naela wasn't dead. Not fully. Her heart still beat faintly, and her mind, fogged with trauma and starvation, clung to a single command: survive. The storm that rolled through the woods that night was violent and unrelenting. Rain fell hard, turning the earth above her into thick, heavy mud. But that same storm may have saved her life. The water softened the soil enough for her weakened limbs to push through. She surfaced sometime before dawn, soaked, trembling, and barely conscious. Her eyes were swollen nearly shut, and her breath came in short, painful gasps. Drenched and cold, she staggered toward what she hoped was the direction of civilization. Naela wandered the woods for nearly 2 days, without food or water, barefoot and bleeding. She didn't know how far she'd traveled or where exactly she had escaped from. Her memory was broken. Flashes of a dark basement, the smell of mildew, the sound of boots on wooden stairs, and the faint echo of someone breathing near her. She didn't remember the man's face or the exact moment she had been taken. Trauma had wiped most of the details away. But what remained was fear and a powerful will to stay alive. It was a park ranger who found her. Early one morning, while checking storm damage near the edge of Halston State Forest, he spotted what he thought was a wild animal curled under a pile of brush. As he got closer, he realized it was a woman, half-conscious, pale, and covered in scratches. She was taken to the nearest hospital by helicopter. For days, her identity remained unknown. She couldn't speak. Her body had gone into shock. But slowly, over time, pieces of her returned. A nurse found a small faded tattoo on her wrist. It matched the missing persons report filed for Naela Trenks over 6 months ago. When the news reached Halston Ridge, the town erupted. It was the headline no one had dared to hope for. One of the missing had returned. Police immediately visited the hospital, desperate for answers, but Naela's memory was scattered and incomplete. She remembered being taken, remembered pain, remembered darkness, but not much else. Her trauma had built a wall around the details, and investigators would have to work slowly to pull it apart. Despite her foggy memory, one thing was clear: Naela hadn't left willingly. Her escape confirmed what many had feared. Someone had taken her, held her captive, and tried to kill her. And if she had survived, it meant the others might not be far from wherever she had been buried. Authorities launched a new search, this time with more urgency. They studied Naela's clothing for soil samples and plant matter, hoping to trace where she had been buried. Specialists were brought in. Forensic biologists analyzed pollen and moss found in her hair. It was a slow process, but it worked. The key: soil on her clothes matched a rare mix found only near an abandoned logging site 30 miles north of town. That location had never been searched during the original investigations. The area was remote and thick with brush. It would have taken someone with deep knowledge of the land to navigate it. Someone like a trapper. Someone like Halric Moen. Search teams swarmed the area. Within hours, they found tire tracks, an old cabin, and something far worse: a basement, hidden beneath the floor, lined with chains, stained walls, and remnants of the missing victims. Naela's return hadn't just brought hope. It had opened the door to a nightmare, and the hunt for a killer had just begun. The cabin sat at the edge of the world, hidden so deep in the forest that even satellite images failed to capture it clearly. It was there, among the twisted trees and overgrown brush, that investigators uncovered the dark heart of Halston Ridge's mystery. The discovery shook even the most seasoned detectives. This was no ordinary crime scene. This was a personal theater of cruelty, designed by a man who had studied isolation and silence as weapons. Inside, the stench was overpowering: mold, blood, and something far worse. The structure itself was falling apart on the outside, camouflaged by time and neglect, but the basement beneath told a different story. It was reinforced with scavenged wood and plastic tarps, insulated to muffle sound. There were handcuffs bolted into the concrete floor, rusted tools, and clothing fragments shoved into a corner. Dried blood stained the walls. On a makeshift table sat a stack of old notebooks, leather-bound and filled with Halric Moen's twisted thoughts. The journals were detailed, methodical, and deeply disturbing. Each victim had their own entries, notes about their routines, weaknesses, responses to fear. Halric had treated them like experiments, recording what made them break, what made them fight, and what made them give up. The entries spanned years, suggesting he had been planning his crimes long before anyone had gone missing. He wrote with the cold detachment of a scientist observing lab rats, not human beings. The final pages, however, revealed something even more troubling. He believed he had succeeded. He wrote that all 3 victims were disposed of, that the chapter was closed. He had no idea Naela had survived. The police immediately issued a warrant for Halric's arrest, but the cabin was empty. He had fled. Inside the cabin, investigators found signs of a recent departure: burnt food, missing clothes, and several maps of surrounding counties marked with escape routes. Halric had likely seen the news of Naela's survival. The moment she resurfaced, he knew his time was running out. The hunter had become the hunted. A massive manhunt was launched. State troopers, forest rangers, and federal agents joined forces. Drones scanned miles of forest. Roadblocks were set up in neighboring towns. Halric was a man who knew how to disappear, but he wasn't invisible. Surveillance footage surfaced of him filling up gas at a rural station under a different name. A week later, he was spotted in a small mountain town, buying canned food and a new jacket. Each sighting brought authorities closer, tightening the net. Back in Halston Ridge, the community struggled to process the horror. Memorials were held for Ari Tommel and Varick Olwyn. Their families, though devastated, were finally given answers. DNA from clothing found in the basement confirmed they had been held in the same place as Naela. A few shallow burial sites were discovered in the woods nearby, including the one Naela had escaped from. Forensic teams worked carefully, recovering every scrap of evidence they could. The woods had hidden so much, but now, slowly, the truth was surfacing. Naela remained under medical supervision, protected around the clock. Authorities feared Halric might try to finish what he started, but she wasn't the same woman who had disappeared months ago. Her body was weak, but her mind had found new strength. Her survival had turned her into the key witness in one of the most horrifying cases the state had ever seen. Halric's world was collapsing. The control he once held so tightly had slipped through his fingers. Every step he took now left a trail. Every moment he stayed free was borrowed time. He had believed he was smarter than everyone, that he had covered every detail. But he had made one mistake. He had left a witness alive. And that was all it took to bring the truth roaring back. For 12 days, Halric Moen remained on the run. He moved through the forest like a shadow, avoiding trails, sleeping under fallen trees, drinking from creeks, and surviving off scraps. He knew how to vanish. He'd done it his entire life. But this time, something was different. The woods that once protected him now felt smaller, tighter, as if they were closing in. Every snapping branch, every gust of wind made him turn. He couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on him. The pressure mounted. His face was plastered on every TV screen, every rest stop bulletin board, every online news outlet. His name, once unknown beyond Halston Ridge, was now part of national headlines. But it wasn't the public that scared Halric. It was Naela. He had read the headlines carefully. Survivor identifies location. Escaped victim returns from grave. He couldn't comprehend how she had made it out. He had watched her stop breathing. Hadn't he? Paranoia consumed him. He stopped sleeping. His mind began to crack, under the weight of fear and hunger. He imagined hearing her voice in the trees, imagined her footsteps behind him. He began burning pages from his journal to stay warm, a symbolic erasure of the life he thought he had mastered. But even as he destroyed the records, he knew it was too late. The damage had been done. The world now knew what he had done, and Naela Trenks was the one who had brought it all down. The breakthrough came in the form of a boot print. It was discovered by a ranger along a forgotten deer path, partially buried in mud, but still fresh. Investigators followed the trail for hours before finding remnants of a fire, a shredded map, and a blanket reeking of sweat. Dogs picked up his scent. The manhunt narrowed to a 10-mile radius near Wolfhead Ridge, a dangerous rocky terrain filled with caves and steep cliffs. It was there, in the jagged quiet of the mountains, that Halric made his last stand. Agents closed in during the night. Helicopters circled overhead with thermal cameras. Officers on foot moved in slowly, sweeping through dense brush and icy ravines. Around 4 a.m., a heat signature was detected in a shallow cave halfway up the ridge. A perimeter was set. Halric was inside, curled against the stone wall, his body shaking from cold and starvation. He didn't resist when they entered. He didn't speak. He simply stared, hollow-eyed, as if all his power had drained from him. At the station, he was silent for hours. No outbursts, no confessions. Just a blank stare and the occasional twitch of a finger. But the evidence was overwhelming. His journals, the crime scene, Naela's survival, all of it pointed directly to him. Forensics confirmed blood from all 3 victims in the basement. Burned remains of clothing were matched to Eritomal, a partial shoe print near Naela's. Grave matched his boots. In court, he showed no emotion. He sat still while families wept, while prosecutors described his crimes in vivid, brutal detail. Naela testified behind a screen, her voice steady but quiet. She spoke of the dark, the hunger, the chains. Her presence in that courtroom was more powerful than any sentence the judge could deliver. Halric Moen was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, unlawful confinement. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. But in the end, justice wasn't just in the sentence. It was in the fact that he had failed. He had tried to erase his victims from the world. Instead, he had been exposed by the one he believed was gone. Naela's survival rewrote the ending of his story. What was meant to be buried became truth. What was meant to disappear became evidence. And the man who thought he got away had, in the end, left behind the one thing he never expected: a survivor.